Welcome to Curriculum Mapping Expectations. When we look at curriculum, if we go back a year and a half and if we were to ask ourselves the following questions listed here in this curriculum questionnaire, how do you think, and it's kind of a question to think about, how do you think we were doing in regard to our curriculum mapping? Did we have curriculum that was highly visible, easily accessible to teachers, students, and parents? Was it in a user-friendly format, easy to read and understand? Was it continually revised? Was it a tool that provided teachers with real current info about content, skills, and assessments? If I jump down, was it the core of teaching practice? Was it embedded in district and state standards? If you go through this entire list of questions, you'd find that in many cases our curriculum wasn't there. We needed to go through and start the curriculum mapping process. But if you start to ask those questions a year and a half later after we started this curriculum mapping process, you'll find that in many cases we're heading in the right direction. So when we talk about why do we want to have curriculum maps, it's because we want to have the answer yes to all of these questions here. This past year, we developed our vision and beliefs about curriculum mapping, and I think it's important when we're in the work that we're doing that we go back to our vision about curriculum and our beliefs about curriculum. I highlighted, all of this is important, but I highlighted some elements that I thought were areas that really stood out for me. If we go to our vision, we're going to see that curriculum development's ongoing, collaborative, and dynamic. This isn't a static curriculum document that goes on a shelf. It's something that we can go back in and we can constantly revise and renew as time goes on. It's something, by having collaborative curriculum development, it leads us to have these critical conversations with one another about teaching and learning, and through those conversations it will lead to increased student engagement. We want a comprehensive curriculum that's aligned, cohesive, rigorous, and engages all students, and one that's transparent. If we think about Atlas Rubicon being used as the database or the tool to house our curriculum, what's great about using Atlas is that it will provide that transparency once we have our curriculum maps, are able to communicate it, and teachers, students, parents, and the community will be able to see what students are learning inside the classrooms each day. Our beliefs, we believe that curriculum design and implementation is an essential component of our professional practice. This isn't something we're adding on in addition to everything we're doing. This should be embedded in what we're doing all the time, knowing what our curriculum is and then heading into how we assess it and know if students are able to know and be able to do what we expect them to do. The process of writing, reflecting, revising curriculum is ongoing, collaborative, and students should be receiving the same common educational experience across grade levels. And I think this is something that, in particular, if we have teachers teaching the same course, or if we have teachers across a grade level into elementary buildings, that in the end our students are receiving the same common educational experience, that they're all receiving the same curriculum, and that's why this is so essential. So a couple quotes to think about as we begin. When we talk about what a quality map is, if you imagine a quality written map is defined as a map wherein map readers do not need the map writer or writers present to correctly interpret the map's data. So at any point, if someone else is looking at your curriculum map, ask yourself, will they be able to understand what you meant when you put in the content or the skills or central questions, etc. And something else to think about writing maps and being an ongoing process is to think about the writing process. So I'd like this quote: there are 3 general stages in the writing process. Some people believe that the only stage that really counts is the second, writing. This isn't so. You need thoughtful pre-writing to develop something worth writing about, and you need careful rewriting to develop something worth reading. So if you look at the process for writing a curriculum map, it's kind of like the writing process where imagine you're writing a paper and you do a draft and you pull together ideas, and then you do your rough drafts, but then the next thing you're going to do, you're going to go back and you're going to read it yourself, and you're going to edit it, and you're going to look at the end criteria or rubric perhaps, and then you're going to go back and make revisions. And you usually aren't going to, turn in that paper to your professor or teacher until you've had someone else read it as well and give feedback. And so it's important in this process that not only are you looking at the rubric for a quality map, but you're also doing this with some of your colleagues as well. So stage one. Hopefully by now everyone knows what stage one in curriculum mapping means, but just as a review, stage one is what students, what we expect for the desired results, what they're going to know and be able to do. So in stage one, we have our essential questions, enduring understandings, content, and skills. But in the center, you'll notice I put standards. And the reason why standards is in the center is because it's the standards that we want to be driving our curriculum and being aligned to the standards. When we look at the unit calendar or the pacing guide, whatever you want to call it, I believe in Atlas it's called the unit calendar. One thing for organization that you want to keep in mind is it should be 2 to 6 weeks per unit. There shouldn't be one long unit that goes all the way across the entire year. If there is, like let's say you put vocabulary and you had one unit and went across the whole year, you really want to break that up into subunits. You want this to be something manageable for a teacher to pick up and go and know what to teach and when to teach it. At any point, what's nice about using the tool of Atlas is that you can go back and revise a timeline after each unit is taught or each year. And so if you found that, the first time I mapped this out, we thought it would be a 6-week unit, but in fact it was a 4-week unit, well, you can easily go in and change the timeline to adjust it for next year. When we go to unit names, you can name the units either according to discipline standard type strands, so let's say number sense or geography of South America, or economics, North American trade, any of these listed here. It could be a broad phrase like biomes or Cold War or pyramid design. But unit names should never be resource driven. So for example, we don't want to see anything that says Unit 1 or Unit 2 or Chapter 1 or Chapter 2. We also want to stay away from naming, so let's say if we're in an English course, naming a unit after a book or a resource. What can also be helpful too is once you put in your draft of what your unit names will be, with something that makes sense, you can also look at the other grades above and below you to develop some consistency in unit naming. If you keep going back to some of the purpose of our curriculum maps, and it's to communicate and to all stakeholders. And so one piece of communication is I should be able to take a look at a unit name and have a good sense of what's going to be going on within that unit. So the next area we want to look at when we're reviewing our maps would be the standards. And these questions are questions you want to ask yourself. So the first thing when I look at standards in a unit, I want to see if there's alignment with the standard, the content, and skills, almost like a triangle, where if I jump down to content and I see a certain content listed, I could then go directly up to the standard in the unit, and I'm going to see the same language and content within one of the standards. And the same thing would go for skills. So if I see an explicit skill in the skill category, I should be able to go up to the standards and find it. So there should be alignment between the three. You want to ask yourself, are there too many standards listed? And I've heard some questions of whether or not there's a limit on, or a certain number that you should have for standards, and there isn't. But if it's all aligned and you're explicitly teaching the content and skills, then the standards will match. But what I found is in some areas, let's say I see it more often in English or ELA, is that a number of the standards are listed, but really in that particular unit, it's not the explicit standard that you are trying to instruct in that unit. So you may need to remove some of them. Something else to just keep in mind once you've gone through your draft of all of your map is ask yourself, are you teaching one part of the standard, or are you teaching the whole standard when you put it in a unit? And what I mean by this is, if you read any standard, in most cases, standards have a couple different elements to it, and it's possible that you're saying, okay, I'm teaching that standard within one unit, but really you were just teaching one part of it. And so you want to kind of go back and double check your standards that you've taught all elements of all the standards. And when we get to stage 2, and that's our assessment stage in our curriculum mapping, we want to make sure that all the assessments align to the standards in that unit. And what's nice about Atlas is when you put in an assessment, maybe it was an end of unit assessment or it's a performance assessment, you're able to check off what standards that assessment is assessing within that unit, and it will be able to track that for you to make sure that you're actually in fact teaching but also assessing all the standards that you said that you were going to.